All right. Kingston Springs Regional Planning Commission. Did you turn on your camera? Camera running?
It's on.
Okay. Kingston Springs Regional Planning Commission meeting is called to order. Roll call of voting members. Keith Allgood is absent.
Not quite.
Keith Allgood is here.
There it is.
Keith Allgood, are you here?
I'm present.
Okay. Tony Campbell?
Here.
Tony Gross?
Here.
Mike Hargis?
Here.
Lauren Hill? Here. Brian McCain is absent. Mike Patno, that's me, here. Chuck Slater?
Here.
Todd Verhoeven?
Here.
Okay, and non-voting staff, Sharon Armstrong?
Here.
John Lawless?
Here.
And Michael Perry?
Here.
Okay, so we have a quorum. And you have before you the Planning Commission meetings from April 14th. Do you have a motion to approve those?
So moved. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so those are approved. And you also have the agenda before you for today's meeting.
Move to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. We have some guests here tonight who want to introduce themselves to the Planning Commission who have placed a bid on some property or contract on some property in Kingston Springs.
So a community input?
Yes, we just wanted to let you know that they were here. And
Okay.
they wanted to be heard within that period.
So, okay, we'll do that in community input section. All right.
Sorry.
So again, we have the meeting agenda before you, but I'll ask John or Sharon, do you have any amendments to this agenda?
No, sir.
Okay. So do we have a motion on this agenda as it's written?
No move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So today's agenda is approved, and now we're at the community input section. So welcome everybody here. Could I see a show of hands of how many of you want to speak? 1, 2, 3. Anybody else? Okay. So if you just want, is 2 minutes enough for each of you? Okay, and I'll just ask that you don't repeat or talk to what somebody else said, but just provide your own comments, okay? All right, so if you, who would like to go first? If you would come up here and introduce yourself and tell me where you live. Tell us where you live. Okay, so you're one, all right.
So my name is Greg Young. We're looking to purchase property at 144 Petro Road beside the truck stop at the end of the cul-de-sac. At that point in time, we look to erect a 60 by 80 metal building to put our family business in that we've been running since 76 or something like that. We're originally from Bellevue. Lived in Bellevue all my life. We build machines that make vinyl records. So we are one of 4 in the world that make the machines that actually make the vinyl records. So we are distributing them all across the country, and possibly in the future some going overseas to make the actual vinyl. So
Okay,
I'm his wife, Allison Young.
okay.
I'm tag along.
employee.
Yeah, but tag along.
So thank you, and I imagine you've already talked to staff at the City Hall and you are
Yes.
going through their process?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you for introducing yourself.
Very good. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, ma'am?
Captain Downs, and I want to speak to y'all about the apartments that's going up behind my resident over there. And I spoke with Mr. McPherson about, we're having an issue about my easement and all, the gate and all that, but other than that, I'm having to put my fence up for my horse. And so he's supposed to, I'm assuming, put up some kind of fence around me from his business to my resident. And so I spoke with him, and he's just kind of got an issue about the matter. But what I wanted to bring to your attention was whenever they do start their construction up there, they were cutting block back a few weeks ago, and the dust from that alone was like white. And so what I'm wondering, when they start doing the work up there, if you have any kind of plans for dust control up there, like watering down the grounds, and when they go to put their lightings up. I mean, I'm like Fort Knox over there where I'm at when the lights come on there across the road. And he's gonna be on the other side of it, so I'm wondering how y'all gonna do that lighting from his parking lot and his business over there. And if he has to put up a privacy fence, is it just a fence in between our resident and business, or is it gonna be a privacy fence where you can't see through there or whatever? And then I told you about the issue still with our gate on my easement. I give him an easement, all the way across his fields, he could build his units there. And he was gonna bring my driveway out and put a gate at the end of it, but now he says he'll put the gate at the top of my driveway at my property line, but he don't wanna do it. So what I'm getting at, I got another 25 foot down there on the easement, so who's taking care of that driveway if I can't put a gate at the end of it, and then I've got another 25 foot that he hasn't done anything with, he's just gonna leave it pretty for ground. I mean, I don't have any say over it, is what I'm saying, and I know it's on his property, but it's my easement. All he's doing when he don't put a gate at the end of it is leaving open for people to come up to my barn and possibly go on through if I don't have it shut. And so, you know, that's a little issue there, but I'm sure we can resolve it. But I was just throwing that at you to see, you know, whenever they do start building, maybe some of this might be considered.
And ma'am, have you talked to John Wallace about these concerns yet?
No,
Okay, so to make sure that we have,
they've been on hold for some bit, so they're not doing anything right now, but I
okay,
will speak.
okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else that wants to provide input before we begin the agenda? All right, thank you. Okay, so old business. First item A, Kingston Springs United Methodist Church, consideration of application of assignment of overlay within the Article 5.300 mixed use to map 96B Group D, parcel 677.01 for the purpose of preserving the historic structure constructed in 1927. The structure preceded adoption in zoning in the town. It was deferred from our April meeting. And who has that one? Sharon, okay?
If you will remember, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, this is a holdover from a couple of months ago. The church down the street combined two lots. They want to build a pavilion so they can have outdoor shade and cover for some of their outdoor activities. Town wasn't able to issue a permit for it, one because it would straddle two parcel lines, secondarily because there was a structure sitting facing Oak Street that's been there forever, but they would also like to have a mixed-use overlay assignment, because right now the church is only tolerated as a special use in the district, and the pavilion that they want to construct for the use of the church, we want to make it legal. What we're finding more and more and more with closings and bank loans and other things is that they're checking for every zoning compliance that there is. One of our applicants this week on another project provided an appraisal report where the basement was finished in the house and it was listed on the appraisal as non-living space because there was no permit issued or CO. So with the church, they want to make sure, and they want to be able to do things outside that are not necessarily consistent with just holding church service. So the mixed-use overlay that we adopted last year is designed to incorporate that amount of flexibility, and they would be your first applicant and approval. If you remember the way it was written, the Planning Commission would review the use and approve whether or not they can have other activities outside, because as you know, the building, the historic building, is occupied for a nonprofit but not public use. I'm not going to disclose what the use is. So if this is assigned to them, then it gives them the flexibility to continue to operate that way on the property. Construct the pavilion for youth use and community use other than the church. It doesn't have to all just be for the church. It could be a community group that wants to use it. So they're requesting that you, as the pastor put it, bless them with this overlay assignment.
Now, this is on Oak Street.
It's the lot, yes, they combined the two lots there behind the church. And so they're wanting that overlay assignment because the current zoning, because they're a special use, you know, they have to come back and do a whole lot of foot jumping to get through it. So they're asking that this planning commission, who we're tasked as the body, to consider whether or not we allow it. give it to them.
So this would be our approval.
That's correct only. It's left with the planning commission.
I move we approve.
Second.
Okay, any questions, further questions?
No, I'm a member of that church though, so I don't know if that matters.
You can declare that you have a conflict of interest and then you can still vote under
still
the
vote.
ethics code, yeah.
Well, I guess I have a conflict, I'm a member.
Does this establish a precedent for other businesses that we would want to consider whether they could or could not also become mixed use?
The overlay's over the entire downtown
The
area,
entire-
and
Oh, it
it's-
is?
so it's basically a case-by-case situation.
Oh,
So
all
this is the case, this is our first instance of that. So if anybody came with,
They can ask.
if anybie came, same situation,
Got
it
it.
would go through the same process.
Okay, thank you.
So each business or each person comes right back.
So is this, for instance, the permission to live above a business that we put over the whole overlay, is that what this is?
It
That'll be
is,
one
it's
instance.
it's for living above the business. During the pandemic, to address Ms. Hill, during the pandemic, a number of people worked from home because they were required to. We don't allow that. So this is a way to, one, lay this in this mixed-use district downtown, and it may expand to other areas of the city that doesn't make this cumbersome or onerous on a property owner to use their property in a way that really doesn't impact their neighbors. But,
Okay, I didn't really understand that
Yes.
it had already been
and it's
established.
case
so
by
that's great.
case. Traffic is taken into consideration and other things are taken into consideration. In this particular case, it will increase their traffic, so.
There are multiple businesses listed within just,
Okay.
within just the woodlands of the Harpeth. That are, if you look on any type of map that shows businesses, you know, they're all within the houses, yes.
So, any other questions or concerns or
Thank you.
comments? So we have a motion on the floor, it's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Okay, so the next item, item B, under old business, the Clomer Golf Club of Tennessee FEMA review, recommendation on Clomer results to Kingston Springs Board of Commissioners. So this would be our recommendation to the Kingston Springs Board of Commissioners. Consideration of water intake for the Harpeth River on the Golf Club of DBI LLC. Consideration of the revised PUD agreement plan for the Golf Club of DBI LLC. And so I am friends with Jeff Hooper back here, who we both go to the same church, and we're both in the same men's group. So I'm going to declare that. So now you all know. And Martha Brooke, is there anything I need to do other than declare that? Okay.
That's all you gotta do.
All right. So Sharon, were you going to walk through this for us?
Yes, sir. In your packet on the last 4 pages, you're in possession of a staff report, and you're also in possession of a letter of determination that was issued by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, commonly known as FEMA. The cover letter contains no information, but on the first page of the Clomar, which looks like this, and to boil this down into very short language, it indicates there is an increase. The Golf Club of Tennessee and the engineering company that prepared this is of the opinion that that's an error on the part of FEMA in the hydrology that was submitted. Unfortunately for the Planning Commission, we're stuck with the letter that FEMA sent us. It says there is an increase, it says there is no decrease. Our ordinance does not incorporate an increase in the base flood elevation. If you want to construct, and we allow very limited construction in flood areas in your ordinance, in your own ordinance and in your city code. We allow, and some of you who've been on the Planning Commission a while will remember this, we allow access roads, we allow utilities. I see that look, Mr. Campbell, that was changed by the former city attorney directly after the flood. So we allow access roads, we allow utilities, and we allow golf course playing holes because they're considered agricultural activities. So while we allow that, we don't allow it to create an increase. And while Mr. Hooper has spent a great deal of effort along with Mr. Durham behind me from James Plus Associates in sending this to FEMA with 9 addendums in almost a year in review, it came back this way. We don't have the latitude because of our contractual obligations to FEMA. And if I'm sorry, Mr. Campbell, do you need a moment?
They don't have any.
There it is.
Thank you, John. You should have been an EMT.
Thank you, John. I knew you were good for something.
It's always letter. Mr. Campbell, you'll let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay. So, the letter that you have in front of you is something that you will recommend forward to the city commission for consideration because it's attached to projects of the golf club. The increase may or may not be accurate. The reason why the city sent it to FEMA for review is because we don't have staff resources to do these types of reviews. So it spent 9-10 months in review by the engineer selected by FEMA. That review was then forwarded to FEMA, who then issued this letter. And while it may or may not be an error, I'm certainly not a hydrologist, I can't debate that point. We can only consider what's in front of us. And our ordinance does not allow us to do that. So I've listed in a staff report from the city manager and myself, and for those of you who are new to the planning commission, may I introduce your floodplain administrator, who is Mr. Lawler, city manager. That happens sometimes by default. If you're not in the room, you get the job. So in my letter, I have essentially given you 3 pathways. The first pathway is that you can recommend to the city commission to deny acceptance of the CLOMAR to proceed with the project because it reflects a rise in flood, which our ordinance does not allow. Recommend to the city commission to revise the floodplain district ordinance to allow a rise under whatever circumstance the planning commission would wish to make that recommendation. But as a cautionary note, and I always do this when we talk about writing legislation, you can't write legislation specific to a project or an entity, and when you change legislation, it applies to all applicants. Now, does that mean that there can't be language in the ordinance if it were revised that addresses a specific use? You can't address an individual or an entity, you can address the use. So that's the second option that you have. And the third option that you have is to direct the applicant, who was the subject of this review by FEMA, to resubmit their engineering to FEMA in order to cause FEMA to recognize the distinction in hydrology that they say exists in the study they submitted. So those are your 3 options. So, but as of tonight, there are 2 other projects associated with this on your agenda. Those projects, staff recommendation is that you cannot approve them because both of them are associated with flood area. That's the subject of this CLOMAR. So, with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. And John, my recommendation is to, unless the applicant wishes to defer, to have their conversation with FEMA for the mistake that they think exists in the letter. If they defer, they have 30 days to correct that and it comes back. But failing that, my staff recommendation is going to be to deny it.
Okay, Martha Brooke, do you have anything to add?
Sure, I would like to follow up a little bit, and you may want to give the applicant a chance to indicate if they're going to defer or not. On option number 2, about drafting legislation, I mean, people can come forward before any of our boards or commissions and ask for changes in ordinances that affect them that we have not been made aware of affect other people before. Just because we make a change at the behest of one person does not mean that we're changing it specifically for that person. I mean, you may very well be made aware of a circumstance where your ordinance affects that person, but also negatively affects somebody else, and you have an opportunity to change it. Okay, so I would like to make that distinction about changing an ordinance. In this particular circumstance, there may be, and it would have to be something that we'd review, there may be a way to make a very limited change to your ordinance with respect to allowing something within a floodplain. I understand that we've got a couple of different issues, and your planner is on a different page than I am, I think, about this, but we've got a couple of different specific circumstances that you may want to consider if you choose to go that route, and it could be a carefully drafted ordinance. And I believe that's all with respect to this particular matter, yes.
So it says it's 1/10 of a foot in construction, so that's what,
1.2
12
inches.
inches, 1.2 inches,
1.2 inches.
is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so thank you, Sharon and Martha Brooke. Did somebody for the applicant want to?
John,
Oh, John, I'm sorry.
he's got a recommendation.
No, my recommendation follows as the floodplain administrator follows the planner, that as it sits in front of us, the documentation that we received from FEMA and their CLOMAR comments indicate that it is a rise, and our legislation that we have in the books indicates that we do not allow development with a rise.
Okay.
So how long does it delay the project if we deny it?
That's a question that we don't have total control over as a city. For us, it's going to depend on the responsiveness of FEMA and whether or not FEMA concurs with their resubmission or inquiry. For the applicant itself, again, they can defer. The other option is to...
Defer means they can bring it back next month?
That's correct.
And if we deny?
If they deny, they can resubmit next month, but they have to meet the deadline for advertising, which means they'd have to advertise by the end of the week in order to hit that agenda. If you'll remember, Commissioner Clark wanted to expand advertising requirements, so we're now a month now, rather than 3 weeks or 2.5 weeks out. So the advertising requirements have been expanded. Again, the best advice that I can give any applicant in this situation and the city is seek a deferral to resolve the issue. If it's your intent to, and again, I appreciate Martha Brooke rendering an opinion here. That's why I made the distinction between designing an ordinance and addressing an entity or an applicant rather than addressing the use. So as long as ordinances are written in that way, but that process, as you know, it has to be drafted, it has to be brought to you, you have to recommend, it has to go to the city commission, so you're 3 months out at that point. So the least impactful, to answer your question, Mr. Hargis, is to seek a deferral and seek resolution of the issue with FEMA. The attorney, Mr. Cooper, or the attorney, I beg your pardon, the engineer for the project, Mr. Cooper, is alleging that FEMA has just misunderstood and made a mistake, or they're looking at it from a different point of view than we are. So that should be something that's relatively straightforward for him to address with FEMA. But we don't have the ability to change what's in this letter.
They have to request the deferral. We can't just defer, or can we just defer?
You cannot. If you defer it, Tennessee has one of those laws that says you have to take action within a specified period of time. So if you don't take action to either approve or deny, if you defer it, it will be approved by default without any further action on anybody's part.
So even if we decided to change the ordinance, it would take 3 months.
Mr. Hargis, could I jump in real
Sure.
quick, just for the record? Need you to declare conflict in that you're a member.
I am a member. yes.
Okay, all right, just need to make sure that it's a record before we get too far into the discussion.
Okay. So, at this point in time, did somebody want to speak for the applicant, make a comment?
Yes, that'd be great.
Could you come up and introduce yourself, sir?
Commissioners, my name is Robert West, and this is Jeff Hooper. I'm an attorney. Jeff is an engineer. The position we find ourselves in is just a little bit, we are going to follow Mrs. Armstrong's recommendation and try to get FEMA to revise this letter. The letter that they submitted, just for, I don't know if it's a part of your package, you'll note it says that there's an increase, and it also says that there's a decrease. On one page, it implies no increase, no decrease, but there is an increase. And on the next page, it outlines specifically in foot measurements both a decrease and an increase. My concern in coming before you today is that we're going to end up with a submission from FEMA that is going to reflect that there's going to be an increase. And it's also going to reflect decreases. And I'm not sure FEMA has the capacity to interpret the town of Kingston Springs ordinances to say the net effect was not to increase the flooding downstream, if that makes sense. I think they will make a very calculated measurement that there is an increase and that subsequently there's a decrease, and they're not going to make a calculation as to what the net effect is. And we're going to be stuck in a situation where FEMA is going to fully acknowledge that there's an increase, and we would fully acknowledge that there's an increase, and they're going to fully acknowledge that there's a decrease, but they're never going to, this project will never be approved because FEMA is not going to submit to the town that the net impact of those measurements, what that actually is. Secondarily, I'm not sure if FEMA is going to dig into the ordinance specifically enough to address all of the town's concerns. Now, if you're aware of the location of where this is taking place, it's very close to the confluence of Brush Creek and the Harpeth River. And in that confluence area, the backflow of the Harpeth River actually establishes the floodplain, not the floodplain of Brush Creek by itself. The measurements that FEMA has identified as both an increase and a decrease are below the level that FEMA has established for that confluence. So again, I expect a letter from FEMA to say there's an increase and there's a decrease, but practically speaking, the FEMA floodplain line has been established by the confluence, which is feet above where these differences are taking place. And so we humbly come to you just trying to figure out a way to get this approved. And again, we fully intend to work with FEMA to have the letter revised to satisfy the ordinance of the town. I would ask you, and I've proposed this to the city planner and the town manager, of if FEMA is unable to submit a letter that specifically addresses the requirements of the town's ordinance, because that's just not what they do. They submit letters that measure these changes. Whether the Golf Club of Tennessee could finance the town having the study analyzed in comparison with its ordinance by a third-party independent engineering firm to see if the FEMA letters, and again, if the FEMA letter is dispositive on this and there's no ambiguity, I understand you denying the situation. If the FEMA letter comes back, even as revised, creating an ambiguity or at least unanswered questions in the context of the town's ordinance, I would hope that there's a room for a third party to come with specifically to address the town's ordinance, because we feel ultimately confident that there is no exacerbation of downstream flooding by this project. I'm happy to answer any questions. We intend to defer, but and we tend to work with FEMA the next 30 days, and we sincerely hope that we can submit to you a letter that satisfies all the requirements. We're just concerned that we're going to be in a catch-22 situation where, the information in FEMA's letter is going to be accurate, it's going to reflect an increase, it's going to reflect a decrease, and that change is going to take place under the actual flood line, so it's frankly irrelevant, but it's still going to have increase on it, and my interpretation from speaking with the town officials is any letter that reflects increase is going to require a denial by the city. And again, we just feel like that's a catch-22 situation that, we don't see a solution to get out of.
Okay, thank you. Did anybody have any questions at this point?
Well, it says on page 2, I have 5 in the FEMA letter. It says proposed versus existing maximum increase is 0.1 feet. Maximum decrease is 0.9 feet at 2 different measures, 3,100 feet downstream from the clubhouse crossing and 3,800 feet. So going further down from the clubhouse crossing, it looks like it's decreasing more than the increase. Is that
And just
not
to
accurate?
explain, what essentially happens is downstream, there's some cut that's expanding the flood area, if you will, so that's causing that decrease, if you will. So basically, if you put a rock in front of the stream and then a hole behind the rock shows the increase, and then the hole shows the decrease downstream. The net effect of that, I'm not sure FEMA's ever going to be able to, say the net effect is negative. We're going to push FEMA to do that. We feel confident that engineering shows that that net effect is 0. But again, we're just concerned that, ultimately we're never going to be able to produce that for you.
Right. So you're saying this shows in relation to the height of the water as opposed to the expansion of the water? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, the ordinance that we currently have in place, Mr. Allgood, does not allow for an increase in the base flood, an increase in the width of the flood area, or an increase in the velocity.
Okay.
So those 3 factors all weigh in on that. The city chose to adopt this ordinance quite some time ago, and it is what it is. And to speak, if I may, Mr. Chairman, to what Mr. West said. In my career, I've probably seen 10,000 communications from FEMA over the years. It is possible to secure what's known as a hydrology letter from the Division 4 engineer. I've suggested to Mr. Hooper that he contact Mark Vieira if he and Mr. Durham are certain that this creates no impact, then it's possible to obtain that letter. It has been done before. It was done by Trinity Marine in Ashland City. I believe Mr. Campbell remembers when they retrofitted their plant. So it is doable. But we got the letter, same time they got the letter, which was a short time ago. We put it on the agenda as quickly as we could at the request, and made sure it was properly advertised. Again, the best advice that I can give this applicant is to defer in order to seek that, so that we get it in writing from FEMA, which insulates the town and the insurance holders that reside here, and the businesses that are located here. So the Trinity Marine situation for Ashland City created a debacle for the town, to say the least. Once FEMA signed off, they allowed them to do it, then they came back and jumped the city for doing it. So, and it caused a great deal in the county and the city of noise, almost $1 million of tax revenue. So they allow a rise of a foot. So it comes in that. So I understand your point. If you're sure that your engineering is solid, FEMA will issue a hydrology letter.
Well, let's just be clear here, Mrs. Armstrong. The city hasn't requested a hydrology study from us. This is the first time I've ever heard that a hydrology study would satisfy your requirements on this issue. We were asked to issue a CLOMAR.
May I please, I apologize, I'm not trying to interrupt you. I didn't say a hydrology study. It's a hydrology letter. It's a results letter. The study produces the engineer. The engineering is sent for review. FEMA sent back something saying there's an increase at one location, there may be up to 8.9 foot decrease in another area. This is a CLOMAR, it's conditional. They have the ability to issue a hydrology letter based on the study that can say, it speaks directly to the ordinance. We furnished them with the ordinance when we sent the study in. This has zero net, if that's the case. They'll issue that letter. That's what Mr. Vieira does. And in the interim, they can only deal with what they have in front of them. And what they have in front of them indicates an increase. And I understand your, and I'm not saying argument in the adversarial sense, but I understand your argument that all the impact takes place on the golf club and DVI property, within the boundaries of that property. But our ordinance does not accommodate for an impact from one boundary line of an owner to the other boundary line of an owner. It's just impact, period. So the best advice I can give you, with the certainty of your engineer, this can be resolved, is to defer for 30 days. Because the way the ordinance is written right now, you cannot approve it. You can direct staff to rewrite the ordinance. You can, that's one of your options that I listed in there.
Right, just,
We could direct the city commission to direct staff.
Right,
to
I'm
rewrite
saying
it.
they can direct us to draft it, no, to write the ordinance, rewrite the ordinance, to bring for them, to make a recommendation on.
so would that particular condition be something that you could rewrite easily, as far as if the impact is within, does not cross boundary lines?
No, it's
Okay.
not, because that's, again, there are a set of rules by which we can write zoning ordinances that the state dictates. And one of those is that we cannot be project-specific or entity-specific. It can be use-specific.
Right.
So if an ordinance were drafted to accommodate what they're considering to be the backflow of the Harpeth being the issue, the subject issue, and it's the reason why we send it to FEMA. We don't have the capability here to make those judgment calls. We send it to them. So if it were addressed, it could not apply to a specific boundary or property, or you couldn't write it that way because that's too specific. It would have to apply to every circumstance.
So what would the legislation be that would be looking at that we would have to change?
You could, for example, again, she's correct, it could be specific to this
Right.
parcel, but it could be any parcel that fits
That's
a certain
Correct.
set of circumstances, and that would be, within the crafting of the commission.
But also be advised, as I gave the admonition, and I do that every single time you touch legislation, it doesn't apply to just the circumstance. It
Correct.
applies to every
Everyone,
parcel
right.
within the city.
Just my 2 cents on this, I think the flood ordinance serves this town well, and serves this town in ways that towns that don't have this ordinance aren't served, and we know that there are significant high water incidents that happen here almost on a yearly basis. And there's a lot of people that want us out there to change these ordinances, and it's a slippery slope when we start chipping away at what we already have to that. And it's not that, not any of us don't want certain things to happen and all that, but we need to always keep that in mind, that for the greater good of the community, that flood ordinance is a useful tool.
If they create or get the hydrology letter, does that satisfy our current ordinance?
It does. The hydrology letter is an addendum to this letter, but it
Okay.
has to state that it meets the confines of our ordinance, that we are not violating our flood ordinance in doing this, because we can only deal with what's in front of us. And while I understand the argument that they're making, we're stuck with what FEMA sent us.
Right. So.
And we submitted this to FEMA at their request in order to get this information back.
So are the ordinance, any increase, whether there's an
Correct.
increase or not, is
That's
impermissible?
correct.
I'm sorry. I was under the impression that earlier you said it was a net. Now you're saying any
It is a
increase.
net, but
Okay.
it's any increase,
Sure.
regardless of how this expresses it, as long as it's expressing an increase, then we're stuck with what we have in front of us.
Commissioners, respectfully, I would not advise you, and even if it was expeditious for my client to change a statute, I don't think that that's, makes any sense. I appreciate, I'll be perfectly honest with you, we were unfamiliar with this hydrology letter concept. That seems like a way forward. We're not familiar with it. We will do our research on that, but it sounds like that's a addendum to this CLOMAR, which will satisfy the planning commissioner and the city planner. We will pursue that, with all haste, and it sounds like that's the solution forward. It sounds like, that's going to be a win-win for both sides. So we will defer this matter. Hopefully, we can come back to you with that hydrology letter and with some revisions to the CLOMAR and get this satisfied, and we very much appreciate your time.
Thank you. So item 7B is deferred, the applicant is deferred.
You will need to take, do they need to take a motion, is that the request of the applicant?
I think you just noted that it's at the request of the applicant that it's deferred.
Okay. So is there any other business we need to discuss in this meeting?
No.
Okay. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
You do.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.